The Mandalorian is almost here, and I am convinced that Disney has something really special on their hands with this show, but not everybody knows what a Mandalorian even is or the talent that is behind this thing and why that should get everyone very excited. So that is what we are going to go over right now. It's like the news, but for nerds. I gotta pick somebody for a nerd car question. Today's shout out goes to Caleb Fangman. Indeed, 2012 is the last time we had a solo Batman movie, and that fact blows my mind. Make sure you stay to the end of this video where we will ask another nerd card question. What's up, everybody? Happy Wednesday to you. Welcome back to the show. I'm Josh, of course, and insert charming, funny thing. Oh, and real quick, and only because we've been slacking just a little bit on this, guys, if you could chop like, it would be much appreciated. Now, The Mandalorian. Been talking about this show for a little bit here. I've been kind of talking to you guys about how, there's not like a ton of buzz around this show. I think a lot of casual Star Wars fans just don't even know what a Mandalorian is or why they should be excited about this show. While the hardcore Star Wars audience, those that have been, paying attention and watching a lot of Star Wars content on Reddit, the hardcore people, they're pretty aware of why this show is so exciting, the prospect of this show and where it could go. And I've actually been dying to talk about my personal feelings about this show, not only for like its first season, but for the potential of where this show will go, which, to be honest, is always the measure of a great show. Like if you look at Lost or you look at Game of Thrones, it wasn't so much where the show started, but where the show could go, which was what was so exciting about the property. I mean, with Lost, you sort of get more and more mystery as you go on, and you're really introduced to new things that sort of builds the suspense over time, and you're like, holy crap, what the heck's going on this island? And with Game of Thrones, you're like, whoa, we're really opening up the world, all of these new characters. I gotta see where this goes next. The potential for the show in the future is really what gets people excited. But first, let's start with what a Mandalorian is. And I know, most of you Star Wars fans will already know this, but for those of you that aren't sure or just don't understand why it's so cool, let's talk Mandalorians. Mandalorians are a warrior race that hails from a planet in the Outer Rim called Mandalore. Now, it gets sort of weird between what's the official canon of the Mandalorians, because there was a lot of stuff done in the old EU, which was of course just sort of the expanded universe of Star Wars, this larger canon, which is now called Legends under the Disney canon banner, right? And so it's a little confusing for fans that have been fans for a long time as far as what from Legends is true now in canon. And we get certain little teases of that in different things like Star Wars Rebels or even in the Clone Wars when Kenobi talks about the Mandalorian commandos and how they fought many wars, including against the Jedi. And then in Rebels, you get an acknowledgement of different things that were going on with the Mandalorian Jedi Wars and how the Mandalorians had developed their technology and their armor in order to fight against the superior sort of superhuman abilities of the Jedi. And Kanan Jarrus and Sabine Wren in a lot of the episodes in Rebels really explore Mandalore heavily, and that is all canon. But either way you slice it, they're a warrior race that was so freaking strong and just so focused on war that they conquered a lot of the sector around their planet. They would constantly war for more territory. They would war against the Jedi. They were like Sparta from 300, but in the Star Wars universe. I think that's the best way to describe them. And so from what we've seen for the promotion of The Mandalorian and, what Disney is trying to put in front of people, they associate Jango Fett and Boba Fett with Mandalorians, and that is the armor, right? That's the Mandalorian armor. And of course, in the EU, Boba Fett and Jango Fett were Mandalorians, and you could sort of think of it as like the Emperor, right? This brilliant Palpatine Emperor guy was, when he went to make a clone army, he was like, oh no, it's gotta be a Mandalorian, right? It's gotta be a Mandalorian, which should really tell you something about how badass the Mandalorians are. Now, it gets sort of weird in the new canon because apparently Boba Fett and Jango were not actually Mandalorians in the new canon, but let's just leave that for now because I'm hoping that gets retconned and they were indeed Mandalorians because dude, that's stupid. But either way, that's sort of the association that Disney's trying to make between those characters, because I think it's fair to say not a lot of people, not a lot of Star Wars fans have watched Clone Wars and Rebels. Not a lot of the more casual fans know much about Mandalore or the Mandalorians. And so when you get something like the Nick Nolte Ugnaught saying, I have never met a Mandalorian, I've only heard the stories, what he's referring to is some of the stories we were just talking about, how they warred against the Jedi, just different crazy things. And so there will be this presence to this guy, this main character, the Mandalorian, for simply being a Mandalorian. It's like that's crazy. Now, without going into any like leakage or like spoilers or anything like that, the baseline plot for what we think is going to happen in season 1 is pretty obvious, and I think it's pretty played in the trailers. Like, it's just right out there in front of everybody, and I like this actually because it's not like trying to overthink it. It's got a pretty basic Western kind of plot, almost like a lone wolf and cub thing. But essentially, what most people think is going to happen is that the Mandalorian is a bounty hunter. He's just a simple man trying to make his way in the universe. And he finds himself having to take a job with what we think is actually the Empire. This would be Werner Herzog's character. This was because of a scene that was shown at Celebration. But, we're not going into all of that. But essentially, what it means is he takes a job for some part of the Imperial remnant. Now, at this time in the galaxy, the Empire is done, right? It's post-revolution. And that's why you hear Werner Herzog saying in a lot of these trailers, is the galaxy a better place after the revolution? And he's kind of making the case that it's not, and that they need to restore order, and that is a formation of the Imperial remnant there that is trying to reestablish control over the galaxy, okay? But specific to the plot, we believe that the Mandalorian is going to take this job, and the job is going to involve either killing or capturing this young girl. And essentially what's going to happen here is that this character is going to be given this job, but then when he realizes it's for this young girl, he's got like this heart of gold. It's like that Han Solo thing, they talked about at Celebration who the biggest influence for the character was, and it's definitely Clint Eastwood. Like Clint Eastwood in a lot of those Western movies, and you could just see this in a Western movie, right? He's given, I don't even know, it might even be like in Pale Rider, but like he's literally given a job to do, and then he has a moral issue with the job and ends up turning on it and kind of making this turn as a character, and we think he's going to take this young girl and protect this young girl. Okay, so that's the basic plot of it. It's very Western-y. It's very like, man, bad guy takes job is heinous against even his morals. He turns a leaf, and we see sort of his character arc. And so that's the basic plot of what we think's going on. But I really think that's going to be what happens in season 1, and I think we will see a resolution to that. And as I said before, it's not really even season 1 that gets me that excited about The Mandalorian. Like, I'm very excited for this season. Don't get me wrong. And I could gush about all the amazing nerdy things that I think are going to happen and are awesome. But what really excites me is the potential for the show after season 1. Because what you have to understand here is when I first heard of The Mandalorian as a Disney Plus show with a budget that is equivalent to what they were doing with Game of Thrones, what I got excited about was actually more of like what they could do with sort of this political war state that is Mandalore. If you watch Rebels, the thing that's crazy about Mandalore is that there are different houses, there's sort of that caste system, there's this history of them being very war driven, but then there's this newer wave of people that don't want to just be the warmongering crazy people. And so there's this really interesting political thing going on Mandalore, but it's also a very militaristic society. And so to decide the leader, there can be like a trial by combat, and there's this thing called the dark saber, which I'm going to get real nerdy about in a second here, but there's this thing called the dark saber that whoever has that is all of the houses of Mandalore bow to whoever has the dark saber, okay? And so there's really interesting, very Game of Thrones type stuff going on Mandalore. And so I think after a season 1, we could potentially go to Mandalore. And this just like blows my mind to think about, because what we saw in Rebels is just sort of shades and hints and obviously an animated version of Mandalore. But if you take that to the next level with real sets and some of the technology that they are using for the Mandalorian, guys, the sky is the freaking limit when it comes to what they can potentially do with the Mandalorian. And to take it to an even wilder place, there is a deep history with the Jedi, potentially the Sith, and Mandalore. Because as I said before, there was a Jedi-Mandalorian war. The Mandalorians were literally allowed to step toe-to-toe with the Jedi. That's kind of, they sort of got that reputation. That was their thing. They were like, holy crap, Mandalorian commandos. Yeah, I've heard of them. They can literally strike down Jedi Knights. And we all know the reputation of Jedi Knights out there in the galaxy. I mean, little young Anakin Skywalker was like, nobody can kill a Jedi. You know what I mean? Super wrong about that, by the way. But, like, that was the perception, of course, right? The Jedi were these godlike figures. Well, the Mandalorians were literally able to beat them in one-on-one combat. But they weren't always at odds with the Jedi. There was actually a time of peace between Mandalore and the Jedi Order when the first Mandalorian Jedi was introduced into the Jedi Academy, into the Jedi Order. This would be Tar Vizsla. Now, Tar Vizsla is actually the person that created the Darksaber, which we think is actually a completely unique type of saber, perhaps a completely unique kyber crystal or something like that. But either way, this is the dude that created the Darksaber. And during that time, the Jedi and the Mandalorians had a time of peace. You see, it's almost like the Dothraki from Game of Thrones. Like, whoever is the most powerful person, whoever's that person, that's who they follow. And so, literally, Tar Vizsla... Look, guys, can you imagine a Mandalorian Jedi? Like, just considering what I just said, this dude's the most badass dude out, right? And so the Mandalorians are like, oh, we're following him now. And so there was this time period of peace. But that eventually breaks down, and after he dies, like, literally the Jedi Order takes the Darksaber, and then, like, the Mandalorians break in and steal the Darksaber, and the Mandalorians have the saber now. But, like, post-Empire... because, or, you know, this is after the Empire falls at the Battle of Endor. There's an opportunity here for, like, there's barely any Jedi, right? And there's barely any Sith, and there's maybe barely any Mandalorians. And so there's this weird opportunity here for us to talk about that history, perhaps put a new history in place. And particularly when you think about the mystery of the Mandalorian, because I think what they're going to do here is really tease who this guy is, man. I think they're really going to tease who this guy is. And honestly, what if at the end of season 1, you see him exhibit some force-sensitive abilities, and then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, is this a force-sensitive Mandalorian? Is that what we have going on here? Is he a descendant of Tar Vizsla? Is he potentially a new version of Tar Vizsla? Are Mandalorians going to find out about this guy and seek him out and try to drag him into the political situation on Mandalore? There's just potential here to do some really amazing things. I mean, I've even thought about theories like, could it be Ezra Bridger underneath that helmet? Because technically Ezra Bridger is not a Mandalorian, but you could see how he would adopt like the identity of a Mandalorian if you've watched Rebels and you know about his relationship with Sabine Wren and about the time that he spent on Mandalore. You could see how he could actually end up there. And I'm not saying that it is him, but that would be nuts, dude. You know what I mean? And there's also this potential for some of the Rebels characters to be showing up in the show. This is Sabine Wren and Ahsoka Tano, and they're looking for Ezra Bridger the last time we see them. And so, like, my mind is really just exploding with nerdy possibilities of what we can expect in The Mandalorian. But that's sort of all just kind of hype building and theory and speculation about the future. The bottom line is the first season itself looks to be incredible. You got Nick Nolte Ugnaught, right? You've got IG-11, who looks to literally team up with this dude. You've got Gina Carano as Cara Dune. I mean, she looks to be a total badass. And honestly, I'm just going to say it. This is going to be the new fan favorite female character in the Star Wars universe. Gina is bae, and I'm just telling you, this is going to happen. And by the way, Cara Dune? Caleb Dune? Do you guys see where my head is going at with that? If you're super hardcore, you'll know what I'm talking about. Let me know in the comments. But yeah, guys, that's it. That's what I wanted to talk about today. I wanted to talk about The Mandalorian, why I think it's going to be so amazing, and the potential, really focus on the potential, because it's what I get excited about, for what we can do with The Mandalorians and Star Wars lore within this show. Holy crap. And also, I should mention here, we are doing an after show, a Mandalorian after show. Every time there's a Mandalorian episode coming out on Disney Plus, that night there will be a live stream on this channel where we will be talking about that episode. So look forward to that. It's going to be a good time, man. There's some really hype Star Wars stuff coming down the pipe. And now let's check the nerd card before we get out of here, and we're deep diving on this one, man. I want to know, what is the planet that the mass shadow generator was used on by Revan? Now, I will accept the Legends answer or the canon answer, and they're very similar, but just a little bit different. So the question remains, on what planet did Revan unleash the mass shadow generator? Answer that question in the comment section below. As I always say, I hope you're having an awesome and a nerdy day, and I'll see you in the next video.